In 1994, a 23-year-old South Carolina mother, Susan Smith, reported to police that her 2 young sons had been kidnapped during a carjacking. Authorities immediately began searching for 3-year-old Michael and 1-year-old Alex, while the seemingly devastated mother appeared on television, pleading for the safe return of her children. Finally, after more than a week of an intense but fruitless investigation, there was a break in the case, but not the kind everyone had been hoping for. What really had happened to those 2 little boys, only their mother was able to tell. And the truth was shocking.
Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. My name is Joe, I'm the host, and I really appreciate you joining today. If you're new to listening to this podcast, I hope that you'll subscribe and check out more of the episodes available. And coming next week, a 2-part episode on Ed Kemper. It's going to be a little nuts. As usual, if you want to see visuals that go along with these episodes, connect with 10-Minute Murder on social media. Links are in the show notes. And someone on social media reached out and thanked me for my policy on not kink shaming, which, to be honest, was a little bit awkward to read because it was way more descriptive than it should have been. But I don't do that here. I don't kink shame here. I do, however, pit bull shame. Now, calm down. I don't mean pit bull the dog. I mean Mr. Worldwide, Mr. 305. He's awful. He might be a very nice person. I don't know. But his music, yikes. All right, now that I've irritated the appropriate number of people, let's get to today's story. Born on September 26, 1971, in Union, South Carolina, Susan was the only daughter of Linda Sue Harrison and Harry Ray Vaughn. The family lived in a modest brick house on Siegler Road near Foster Park Elementary School, where Susan would eventually attend like her 2 older brothers. But before the little girl even had a chance to take her first steps, her parents' marriage was already in serious trouble. It has been said that Linda and Harry didn't really fit together in the first place. And from what I've read, that was not a lie. Things between Susan's parents continued to escalate to the point that Harry became a serious threat to his own family. He was extremely paranoid, constantly thinking that Linda was off having affairs behind his back. And Harry's heavy drinking didn't make the situation any better, nor did the inability to talk about his problems. Instead of sitting down and having a conversation, Harry picked up a gun on more than one occasion and threatened to kill Linda and himself, and sometimes the children too. Needless to say, while Susan was still a little bit too young to fully understand what was going on, her brothers weren't doing great. The oldest even attempted to hang himself at one point and was treated at Duke University Medical Center. Harry was making his family's life like a living nightmare, and yet Susan was still very much a daddy's girl. Although we can all agree that Harry didn't really deserve his daughter's unconditional love, for a 5-year-old Susan, her father was the most important person in the whole world, someone who always made her feel good no matter what. But while Susan would light up every time Harry entered the room, it didn't mean she was completely unaffected by the chaos in the household. The little girl was described as being rather unusual and an unhappy child. Not that she would have never laughed or played with her friends, but Susan was often seen just sitting and staring into space, like she didn't have a single thought behind her eyes. Then, in 1977, after 17 years of marriage, Linda finally had enough, and she filed for divorce. Of course, even though her husband had done everything he could possibly do up until this point to drive his family away, he was absolutely devastated. For him, living apart from his children was a cruel punishment. But not having any other options, Harry moved out, with great reluctance, to an apartment in a nearby union housing development and continued to abuse alcohol, making frequent visits to a local bar called Alias Smith & Jones. The bartender there later described Harry as an outgoing, good-looking guy who always seemed like a nice person. Maybe he really was all of those things, but the violent, severely depressed side of Harry Vaughn had not gone anywhere. He was just pretty good at hiding it from everybody other than his family members. So for many, it came as a pretty big surprise when they heard that 5 weeks after Harry and Linda's divorce, Harry took his own life. On January 15, 1978, after one more heated argument with his now ex-wife, Harry took a gun, placed it between his legs, and aimed at his abdomen out of desperation and hopelessness, and pulled the trigger. However, that kind of thing does not necessarily kill a person right away. The stomach isn't really the best place to shoot yourself for a quick death. While he was laying there, in obvious pain, it seemed like Harry maybe changed his mind about wanting to die, and he called 911, but help came too late. He died in the hospital at the age of 36. Little Susan was told that there had been an accident. Her mother said, quote, "Your daddy went to be in heaven." For a short while, Susan pondered the news before she replied, as you would expect a 6-year-old girl who adored her father to do. "I want to go to heaven too, so I can be with my daddy." Harry's suicide left a massive void in Susan's life. During her childhood, she treasured 2 possessions, her father's old coin collection and a tape recording of his voice, which she played frequently. But unlike her daughter, Linda did not mourn for very long, and within 2 weeks, she married again. And just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, of course, they did. Linda's new husband, Beverly Russell, was not much better of a father figure than Harry had been. While he didn't go around the house threatening to kill everybody, he did sexually abuse Susan during her teenage years. By the time Susan graduated from high school in 1989, she had a relationship with an older, married man, had gotten pregnant but had an abortion. In addition, Susan had attempted suicide twice, the first time at the age of 13 and then again at 17, just before she met a man named David Smith. During the summer of 1990, David and Susan began to date, and after no more than a year, Susan found out she was pregnant. They decided to keep the baby and got married. Unfortunately, the marriage became as unstable as everything else in Susan's life had been up until that point. There were mutual allegations of infidelity, and the Smiths separated several times, but always found their way back together. And despite their problems, Susan and David had 2 children, Michael, who was born on October 10, 1991, and Alex on August 5, 1993. But just 3 weeks after Alex's birth, Susan and David once again decided that their relationship was over, and David moved out. And during this time, Susan had a brief relationship with one of her coworkers. He was a handsome and rich guy named Tom Finley. Beginning in January 1994, after several months, Susan and Tom frequently met for dates and visited Tom's father's cottage for parties. Susan seemed to think that she had finally found someone who could bring her dreams of love and stability alive, but Tom had other plans. Not long after Susan's attorney had served divorce papers to David, she received an infuriating letter from Tom, dated October 17, 1994. The beginning of the letter said, quote, "You will, without a doubt, make some lucky man a great wife, but unfortunately, it won't be me. Susan, I could really fall for you. You have some endearing qualities about you, and I think that you are a terrific person. But like I've told you before, there are some things about you that aren't suited for me. And yes, I'm speaking about your children." So Susan had just ended her marriage with David, and now her boyfriend did not want to date her anymore because of her 2 sons. Needless to say, Susan was feeling pretty desperate, but nobody could have known the lengths that she would go to get what she wanted. On October 25, 1994, Susan asked her supervisor at Conso, Sandy Williams, if she could leave work early, and told her that she was upset because she was, quote, "in love with someone who didn't love me." Sandy asked who this person was, and Susan replied, "Tom Finley, but it can never be because of my children." Later that afternoon, Susan talked with Tom, who told her that their friendship would remain the same, but their intimate relationship would stop forever. Susan was upset, to say the least, and so after thinking about her options, around 8 p.m., she dressed Michael and Alex, placed them in her car, and began driving without a destination. Just an hour later, when Susan appeared on the front porch of a woman named Shirley McLeod, her car or her sons were nowhere to be seen. According to Shirley, the young woman had cried hysterically, "Please help me. He's got my kids, and he's got my car. A black man has got my kids and my car." When the police arrived on the scene, Susan told them the same story. "I was stopped at the red light at Monarch Hills, and a black man jumped in and told me to drive. I asked him why he was doing this, and he said, 'Shut up and drive, or I'll kill you.' After about 4 miles, he told me to get out." The man had driven away with Susan's children still in the car's back seat. At first, no one questioned the story that Susan had provided, and an extensive manhunt was launched to find Michael and Alex. For days, Union County Sheriff's deputies and volunteers searched for Susan's Mazda and her two sons. They even went through the nearby lakes and ponds just in case, but came back empty-handed. It was like the earth had swallowed up the vehicle and the two boys, which, of course, was not very far from the truth. Meanwhile, Tom Finley called Susan as soon as he heard the news and expressed his sympathies. But the woman you would think to be devastated because her children had just been kidnapped quickly changed the subject topic of the conversation. Susan didn't want to talk about Michael and Alex, but their relationship. And yet again, she didn't get what she wanted as Tom told her to not worry about the relationship, to concentrate on her children. After that, Tom never contacted Susan again. After 9 days of intense searches and national media attention, the unthinkable fates of Michael and Alex were found out. Ironically, this happened only because the person behind their disappearance had covered their tracks too well. They initially thought that the vehicle and children would have been found quickly, but as days went on and she was living under constant pressure, Susan Smith finally cracked. While meeting with Sheriff Wells on Thursday, November 3rd, the mother of the two missing boys collapsed and began to sob. Susan admitted that there never had been a carjacking in the first place. It was her that had driven to John D. Long Lake and drowned her children by sending the car into the dark water. Divers soon located an upside-down Mazda in the lake, Michael and Alex's little bodies still strapped in the back seat. Following the discovery, Susan was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. She began to receive lots of hate and was named the baby killer before her trial even started. Susan's troubled and traumatic past was used by her defense, who said that she suffered from severe depression, but nobody was really interested to hear that. The only thing that mattered was the fact that Susan had taken the lives of 2 very young, defenseless children. And for what? To try to start a new life with her lover who didn't accept her children. It wasn't really a surprise to anybody that the jury only deliberated for 2.5 hours before coming back with a guilty verdict. On July 27, 1995, Judge Howard sentenced Susan Smith to 30 years to life in prison. She just narrowly avoided the death penalty. Susan Smith will be eligible for parole in 2025 after she has served 30 years. And to this day, public opinion of Susan Smith remains split. Was she just a cold-blooded child murderer, or was she a victim herself due to her abusive childhood and the fact that she never received help for her problems? So what do you think? That's today's 10-minute murder. Brief and bingeable true crime. Thanks for listening today, and I'll tell you what I think. Not that you asked or anything, but keep her in jail for the rest of her life. I mean, I get the other side. I understand it. I'm a huge advocate for mental health, as you've heard me mention multiple times on this podcast. But she doesn't belong on the outside. Before you go, make sure you are subscribed to 10-Minute Murder so that you don't miss any future episodes. Also, you can connect with 10-Minute Murder on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Links are in the show notes of this episode, or you can search for it in one of those apps and you'll find it. It'll pop right up. And if you have friends and they are into brief true crime stories like this one, or you think that they might be into brief true crime stories, let them know about 10-Minute Murder. Thanks for listening. Be safe and have a good night.